Good morning, friends, and I am so glad you are here. Now, I've actually recorded this video 3 times now. This is the third because the first time I swapped 2 names and the second time I swapped 2 different names. And I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're going to try to get it right this time. But this video is about feeling unloved. And I feel like this is a topic that could be, feeling unloved can be a reason that you don't feel contentment and joy and peace. And maybe why you do feel bitterness sometimes is if you're feeling unloved. And this could be unloved by your husband or your children, your parents, siblings, or even just as society. If you're single and maybe you just feel unloved because you don't have a significant other, or maybe you're widowed, this is for you. And even if you are a man, because we can all feel unloved sometimes. And so I want to talk about a story, and hopefully, please, if I say the wrong name and you know it's the wrong name, please just overlook it this time. So I want to talk to you about the story of Leah and Rachel and Jacob. And I'd watched a sermon this weekend that kind of sparked this, and I was like, I'd never really heard it talked about this way. And the name of the sermon was The Unloved Woman. So if you know the story, and even if you don't, if you do or you don't, I would encourage you to read it. In the book of Genesis, chapter 29. So, Jacob falls in love with a girl named Rachel, and he wants to marry her. And so her dad, who to me seems a bit like a scoundrel, the dad says, okay, but you have to work for me for 7 years first. And so he agrees. And so he works for the dad for 7 years. And then on the wedding night, they go in and they consummate the marriage. And he can't see anything. It's dark. And the next morning, he realizes that was Leah, Rachel's sister. Now, Leah is described as having weak eyes, and I think that probably meant that she was unattractive. It makes me kind of wonder if maybe there was something else wrong with her, like she wasn't very bright, or maybe she had just some other condition. I don't know, but she was not loved. She was the older sister, but there was no one pursuing her. Dad felt like he just had to get rid of her if he's ever going to be able to marry Rachel or have Rachel married, because it's apparently tradition for the oldest to get married first. And so he had to get rid of her so that Jacob could marry Rachel. And so he sent Leah in Rachel's place. And can you imagine the humiliation that Leah must have felt when that morning, when Jacob woke up and realized it was Leah and not Rachel? He was angry. He was upset. Can you imagine what that must have felt like to know her dad didn't feel like she could, get a husband on her own, and he wanted to kind of be rid of her. And so he goes and just gives her to some man that didn't want her. And now she's got to deal with being in this marriage to somebody who didn't want her. And so when Jacob realizes what happened, he goes to their father and says, this is not who I wanted. I wanted Rachel. And he was like, just go along with everything for the week of the wedding ceremony, wedding celebration and all that. And then at the end of it, you can have Rachel, but you're going to have to work for me for 7 more years. And so he ends up willing to work for someone 14 years just to get their hand in marriage, just to be able to be married to this person. Now, I don't think he didn't work. My understanding is that he gave Rachel to Jacob right after that week-long ceremony. And then he just had to continue to work for the dad for another 7 years. And through all of this, can you imagine what it must have been like to be Leah? And so feeling completely unloved in this situation and basically trapped in this situation. And so I'm going to start reading in chapter 29, verse 31, and I'm reading from my New King James Version. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." So see, she's really focused on wanting her husband to love her. And then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." And she called his name Simeon. See, it's all about, oh, my husband's going to love me now. I've given him 2 sons. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So every time it was like, oh, now he's going to love me. Now I've done something else for him. Now he's going to love me. But he never did. And then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Now I will praise the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. Now I don't think I mentioned it, because I've borne him 3 sons, therefore his name was called Levi. So she gave birth to Reuben, then Simeon, then Levi, and then Judah. So this whole time she was feeling insignificant and unloved. But let's think about what happened. And see, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb. But Rachel, who was very well loved, she was barren. And so God saw her, and he blessed her with these children. Now, he didn't bless her with the love of Jacob. He blessed her with children. And those children, even though she felt unloved, insignificant, and had no way of knowing what her legacy would be, what would happen with the children that she bore, she didn't realize that. But now looking back, now that we know, look at how important of a role that Leah played. Let's talk about Levi. From Levi, we get Moses and Aaron, the priesthood, the ones who can come into the presence of the Lord inside the tabernacle. They're the ones who are responsible for the Levitical law, the 10 commandments. You know, so much richness came from the tribe of Levi, which came from her. And then let's think of Judah. Who came from the tribe of Judah? We've got King David, and then we have Jesus, the Lion of Judah, that they're descendants of Leah. And so even though during her lifetime she felt unloved and insignificant, her legacy was huge. God used her in a huge way. Now, I'm not saying that we're all going to, go out and be the ancestors of great people. But what I am saying is that God is using us, and even if we are feeling unloved by other people, we are loved by God, and we are seen by God, and we are blessed by God. And sometimes we will get to see those blessings, and sometimes we may think that there are no blessings, but they come later, and we may or may not see them in our generation while we're alive. But that doesn't mean that God is not seeing us, loving us and blessing us. And so just know, let that give you contentment and joy and peace, knowing that God sees you. He's working things out for you. And it may not be until you're gone that you realize the greatness of His blessings on your life. And so, on that note, I love you guys, but not as much as Jesus does. I will talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.